Nobles gather in a grand, brightly lit palace ballroom. Dancing couples exchange romantic gazes in the center of the hall. High society ladies gossip about a stunning woman entering the room. Rumors spread about her past debts and expensive new attire. A noble woman expresses shock and envy toward the House of Eilon. Narrative text describes a woman returning after her family's downfall. Judith Mayes is formally introduced as the newest member of the family. Gossipers question her pregnancy while the young duke remains missing. One woman suggests trickery while another warns against such scandalous talk.
A blonde woman in a purple dress snaps her fan shut.
The Duchess Medius scolds the nobles for disrespecting her daughter-in-law. A purple-haired noblewoman apologizes profusely for her disrespectful slip of tongue. The Duchess leads Judith away, choosing to ignore the trivial crowd. Judith follows the Duchess out to rest for her child's sake. The two women depart as the ballroom crowd watches them leave. Grand golden doors close, signaling the end of the public appearance. Judith exhales deeply, feeling relieved to escape the suffocating social atmosphere. The Duchess observes that the gossipers may soon face grave consequences. Nobles note how the Duchess dotes on a former commoner. A lingering question asks for the whereabouts of young Duke Cheon. The Duchess concludes that rumors will successfully halt his death registration. Judith reacts with a sudden, wide-eyed realization of the current situation. Judith offers to return the jewelry, but the Duchess refuses. The Duchess insists Judith keep the items and orders new clothes. The Duchess orders a late-night snack for the thin, pregnant Morin. Judith agrees to her mother-in-law's request with a quiet affirmation. The Duchess expresses satisfaction that her instructions have been understood. Judith realizes the Duchess is actually being protective of her well-being. Judith reflects on her surprisingly pleasant life within this villainous family. She recalls escaping a life of crushing debt and family tragedy. Judith finds her new family to be unexpectedly kind and welcoming. The carriage wheels turn as they arrive back at the mansion. Judith steps out of the carriage, deciding to enjoy her luxury. A sudden, deep voice declares they are late, startling the redhead. A blonde man greets them, noting it has been a long time. The Duchess stares in disbelief as Cheon greets his mother warmly. The blonde man identifies the red-haired woman as his supposed wife. Judith stands frozen, facing the man she believed was long dead. Internal panic ensues over the impossible return of the missing Duke. Narrative text expresses shock that the supposedly dead man is alive. Young Duke Cheon Mikas gazes at Judith with a calm expression. Judith remains completely speechless at the Duke's sudden and unexpected return. A flashback shows Judith being cruelly evicted from her former home. She recalls realizing she was reincarnated into a novel she read. The narrative text notes how people snop during moments of great shock. The novel's plot follows a heroine who lost her flower shop. Judith previously ran through the city to confirm if the world was real. She located the girl she believed was the novel's main protagonist. Relief washed over her as the book's events were proven true. Judith was shocked to find the heroine was only 12 years old. Judith stands before a floral shop, beginning her journey in a new world. Dark memories of debt collectors and cruel ultimatums haunt her reflections. Voices from the past suggest a loveless marriage to escape financial ruin. Judith wakes up in a cold sweat as the nightmare finally ends. She realizes the current reality is more difficult than she ever expected. Waking from sleep leads her back into a reality worse than any nightmare. Judith resolves to stop wallowing and use her knowledge of the novel. She decides to leverage the story's timeline to secure her own survival. The novel's prologue begins with a street fire when the heroine is 15. Judith reviews the timeline, noting the heroine is currently only 12 years old. She calculates she has 3 years until the prologue and 5 until the story. She remembers the novel perfectly but lacks connections to the main cast. Judith considers using villains or hidden information to change her fate. She realizes the Mayus ducal house is the key to her plan. Karl Mayus is the novel's villain who torments the heroine due to tragedy. Karl's older brother, Cheon Mayus, vanished and was eventually declared dead. The family hired a fake daughter-in-law to block the missing heir's death registration. Despite the desperate performance by the family, the missing Duke never returned. Left alone, young Karl's personality became twisted by his family's circumstances. The contract daughter-in-law subtly abused Karl, cementing his path toward villainy. Judith decides she will take that contract role for herself this time. She believes this is a perfect plan to secure her future. This role allows her to prevent child abuse and earn survival money. Judith must now endure the next 3 years for the opportunity to arise. Years later, the red-haired woman arrives at the gray information brokerage. An employee at a grand desk welcomes her to the secret guild. Judith states she is there to sell information to the organization. The employee refuses her request to speak directly with the guild's master. Judith asks if the master is refusing her just because she is young. "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Judith offers a confident smile as she challenges the brokerage's rules. The red-haired woman waits as the employee is left speechless by her claim. A voice from behind the door expresses curiosity about the interesting guest. A tall man in a white mask enters and greets his visitor. The mysterious master of the guild reveals his striking, glowing red eyes. The Gray Information Guild is a rapidly growing power led by this man. Judith has spent 3 years selling reliable, high-quality information to this guild. A beautiful bouquet arrived to celebrate the coming of age of Baroness Aylin. The masked master personally presents the flowers to his VIP customer. Judith asks how he knew her birthday when she never told him. He claims professional necessity and asks how she knew his secret age. The master wonders how she knows so much about things she shouldn't. Judith claims she found the information while wandering to pay off her debts. He admits that the accuracy of her information is nothing short of groundbreaking. Judith secretly worries that selling too much might inadvertently change the future. She enjoys her tea, knowing her long-term goal is finally within reach. Judith tells the master she has something to sell and something to buy. The masked man notes this is the first time she is buying information. He expresses interest in her expensive request and asks what she wants first. Judith requests information on Eki and Mekius, causing the master to stop in surprise. Judith requests specific information on Eki and Mias from the masked master. Eki and Maius was a capable heir who mysteriously vanished years ago. Judith resolves to claim the position of the media's fake daughter-in-law. The red-haired woman ponders her next move with a mischievous smile. The master questions why she is suddenly interested in the missing duke. Judith casually claims she has developed a bit of interest in him. The master spits out his tea when she mentions a romantic interest. He is visibly shocked that she would harbor feelings for the duke. Judith teases him for thinking she only cared about her family's debts. She explains it is natural to be curious about someone so handsome. He notes they've never met, but Judith admits watching from afar. Judith observes that the master seems surprisingly knowledgeable about the young duke. She asks for the specific reasons behind his disappearance and current location. Judith offers a sweet, hopeful smile while waiting for the guild's response. The master admits he knows almost nothing about the duke's current life. He explains his information only covers the period before the duke's disappearance. He suggests she forget him, noting even the duchy's searches failed. He notes the family's long wait will soon end with a death declaration. The master apologizes for being unable to provide any more useful details. Judith suspects the master isn't intentionally hiding information from his VIP guest. She feels a sense of disappointment despite her high expectations for information. Judith wonders where the duke could be if he were actually alive. She contemplates the grim possibility that the missing heir is truly dead. Judith assumes a capable man like him must be surviving somewhere else. She worries about unexpected variables like his return ruining her upcoming plan. Judith changes the subject back to the business of selling her information. The master asks how she could possibly develop deep feelings without meeting. Judith bluntly admits she places a high priority on a person's looks. She claims she wanted to find him to celebrate her coming of age. The chibi master expresses regret for being unable to assist her request. He asks her to present the information she originally intended to sell. Judith requests a pen to document some very expensive and urgent information. The master realizes she is sketching a map of the local neighborhood. She points out a specific shop that operates within the black market. Judith warns that hidden explosives will soon destroy the entire street area. The master is stunned as she defers her payment until a later date. Judith offers to deduct the cost of her birthday bouquet from the fee. She trusts the master will deal with the danger at the shop. Judith worries about disrupting the original story's flow with her intervention. Narrative text explains her caution regarding the consequences of the butterfly effect. Flashbacks recall the various stories she has shared with the guild previously. Despite the story's timeline, she cannot allow innocent people to die tonight. Judith walks through a garden reflecting on her path toward the duchy. She believes this incident won't interfere with her fake daughter-in-law plan. She hopes her plan will prevent future hardships for the story's cast. Judith prepares to start her contract at the Grand Mias Duchy tomorrow. A voice states that no one can see the madam without appointments. A stern, gray-haired butler stands guard at the entrance of the estate. Judith claims she has urgent news and asks for an immediate audience. The butler checks his records but cannot provide her a definitive answer. The gray-haired butler informs Judith she must wait 3 months. Judith forces a nervous smile while sweating under the butler's gaze. She reflects on the harsh punishment for those lying about Ekian. Judith rejects the delay, fearing the family will find another candidate. The red-haired woman claims she has vital information regarding the duke. Judith reveals a specific childhood detail about Ekian to the butler. The butler is visibly shaken by the accuracy of her claim. Judith offers to return later once her information has been verified. The Duchess acknowledges the rumor that Judith knew Ekian's childhood habit. The blonde Duchess admits her desperation while sitting across from Judith. A stern warning is issued regarding the consequences of foul intentions. Judith confidently accepts the terms with a pleasant, unwavering smile. She clarifies her purpose is not simply finding the missing duke. The Duchess is taken aback when Judith formally proposes a deal. Judith instructs the Duchess to find a letter hidden in Ekian's room. The two women sit in silence amidst the grand drawing room. Judith insists on waiting for proof before continuing their negotiation. The Duchess rings her bell and orders a maid to investigate. A maid bows and departs to fulfill the urgent royal command. Judith reflects on using the hidden letter earlier than the original timeline. The Duchess's hand trembles as she waits for the maid's return. Judith notes the cold Duchess's obvious vulnerability regarding her missing son. A knock at the door signals the arrival of the maid. The Duchess urgently demands an update as the maid enters the room. A sealed envelope is presented, having been found inside the bedroom wall. The Duchess is overcome with emotion while holding the recovered letter. She tearfully confirms that the handwriting belongs to her missing son. The Duchess questions how Judith could possibly possess such intimate knowledge. She pledges the family's full power if it means seeing Cheon again. Judith wonders why anyone would leave a family that loved them. The Duchess offers Judith anything she desires in exchange for her help. Judith redirects the conversation toward her formal proposal for the duchy. She acknowledges the Duchess's attempt to delay Cheon's death registration. Judith requests 2 days for the Duchess to investigate her identity. The Duchess agrees to meet again in 2 days to negotiate. Judith departs, feeling immense relief after enduring the Duchess's stifling presence. She questions the uncanny accuracy of her memories regarding the novel. Judith wonders if someone intentionally forced this knowledge into her mind. Passers-by discuss a major explosion that was narrowly avoided in town. Judith realizes the Masked Master successfully prevented the disaster she predicted. The Master of the Information Guild suddenly appears and questions Judith. The tall, masked man greets Judith as Lady Aylin in the street. Judith notes how tired the Master looks after his secret mission. The Master asks why Judith visited the Mias Duchy that morning. Judith promises to reveal her secret business at the Grand Estate. She stops walking as she prepares to deliver her shocking news. Judith whispers her plan to marry into the Melius ducal house. The Chibi Master is left completely stunned by her unexpected declaration. He questions if she meant the child heir or the married duke. Judith clarifies the illegal nature of her proposal while the Master panics. Judith announces her shocking plan to marry the missing young duke of the Melius house. The Master questions if she specifically means Cheon Maes while she confirms her target. The masked man is bewildered, wondering how she intends to marry a missing man. Judith playfully teases the Master for his claim of knowing nothing about the duke. Appearing flustered and sweaty, the Master tells Judith to stay back and watch him. Judith winks, confidently asserting that her intuition has never been wrong before today. Judith Aylin was considered a bizarre woman from the start. The story notes that reaching adulthood transformed Judith from bizarre to flat-out strange. Narrator text highlights the absurdity of Judith claiming to marry a man she never met. Judith smiles brightly in a wedding gown despite the Duke's upcoming death declaration. A narrator reflects on how the idea of marrying a missing man is completely absurd. The unmasked Master contemplates the situation, acknowledging that Judith is not a common scammer. Clenching the curtain, the Master notes the Mias family is no easy target. Walking in his study, the Master remains deeply confused by Judith's marriage declaration. Leaning on his desk, the Master admits he cannot understand her bizarre plan. The Master, revealed as Cheon Maes, wonders how Judith intends to marry him. Text reveals that everyone at the Mesius estate once recognized him as the Duke. Flashbacks show him leaving the estate, believing Carl should have been the true heir. He disappeared to ensure his presence would never interfere with the succession decision. For 5 years, he lived as the Information Bureau Master after erasing his past. The unmasked man finds the idea of Judith liking his former self entirely ridiculous. Reviewing papers, the Master realizes something surprising about Judith's lack of high-ranking connections. He remembers she saved an entire alley and intended to reward her personally. Holding a letter, he considers seeing her but assumes she is currently tutoring. The Master notes Judith must be one of the busiest people in the capital. His red eyes narrow as he reflects on her bright, positive, and diligent nature. Judith is depicted handling difficult tasks with a pleasant and unwavering smile. The Master decides to summon Judith to finish their business and discuss her marriage. He prepares to write a letter, focusing intently on her unusual marriage plan. Judith walks through town early in the morning, worrying she is ahead of schedule. She is startled when a formal voice greets her as Baroness Judith O'Reilly. A gray-haired man informs Judith that the Duchess has sent an immediate escort. Judith offers to cancel her lessons, but the man insists it won't be necessary. He explains the Duke's estate already settled her affairs, and she agrees to go. The gray-haired man leads Judith through a market alley toward a waiting carriage. Judith marvels at the family's efficiency, but wonders why they haven't found their son. She recalls that members of the Maes line are known for their striking blonde hair. Judith contemplates the possibility that the missing Duke actually died years ago. She wonders if he was terminally ill and left home to hide his suffering. The red-haired woman considers why someone would abandon wealth, fame, and a loving family. The butler helps Judith into a black carriage as she prepares for the meeting. Stepping into the vehicle, Judith feels that her long-awaited time has finally come. Narrative text explains the Duchess completed a background check and sent for Judith early. Sitting for tea, the blonde Duchess asks Judith if the sudden investigation caused any offense. Judith wonders why a single day felt so long while meeting with the Duchess. The blonde woman gets straight to the point, demanding to hear Judith's specific proposal. Judith mentions the 5-year deadline for reporting a death and the family's desire for postponement. She shocks the Duchess by revealing her knowledge of the plan to announce a pregnancy. Narrator text explains that confirming the Medius bloodline in an unborn child delays death reports. The Duchess realizes Judith understands that only the family head can identify the Medius bloodline. Judith confirms that her proposal serves as a temporary monthly fix. The Duchess expresses her wish for her son to return home. Judith informs the Duchess that the young Duke will not return. The blonde Duchess is visibly shocked by Judith's blunt, sudden statement. Judith proposes faking a pregnancy and miscarriage to delay death registration. The Duchess hesitates, acknowledging the weight of Judith's high-risk request. Narration explains the permanent social damage Judith's reputation will suffer. The Duchess remains silent, carefully considering the risks Judith is taking. Judith explains her desperate financial situation and the abandonment of honor. She highlights that her immediate survival is more important than reputation. The Duchess is impressed by Judith's composure despite her difficult past. The scene shifts to the Duchess reviewing her son's disappearance records. A gray-haired butler reports that Judith's background appears mostly ordinary. The Duchess questions how a mere informant discovered such intimate secrets. She remains deeply confused by how Judith obtained such specific information. The Duchess prepares to ask Judith one final critical question. She questions why Judith's records show no travel during the disappearance. Judith claims her information comes from prophetic dreams she's had since childhood. The Duchess reluctantly accepts Judith's absurd explanation about her prophetic dreams. The blonde woman questions Judith's lack of tactical skill in negotiations. She criticizes Judith for being too honest about the Duke's absence. The Duchess points out how Judith could have easily used deception. He wonders why Judith is being so honest while seeking a favor. The Duchess demands to know Judith's motive for her total transparency. The blonde woman stares intently, waiting for Judith's honest explanation. She probes why Judith is honest despite calling noble honor a luxury. The Duchess demands to know the reason for Judith's self-sabotaging honesty. The Duchess maintains a focused gaze while awaiting Judith's definitive answer. Judith admits she has abandoned her pride and status as a noble. She clarifies that she still retains her fundamental integrity as a human. Judith openly admits her primary motivation is her massive financial debt. She refuses to manipulate a family's hope just to settle her debts. Judith warns the plan is only a costly way to protect honor. She promises to fulfill her contract role without causing any trouble. The Duchess internally decides to trust Judith with the risky deal. She observes Judith with a newly softened and more reflective expression. The Duchess formally accepts the proposal and agrees to the deal. She suggests immediately filling out the marriage registration to save time. The Duchess clarifies that this arrangement is strictly a business transaction. She expresses her hope that her son will eventually marry for love. Judith promises to leave the estate quietly once the contract ends. The red-haired woman offers a bright smile to finalize their agreement. Judith is stunned when the Duchess offers a massive double payment. The Duchess justifies the high compensation while Judith fumbles in surprise. Overwhelmed by the news, Judith pinches her cheeks to confirm reality. Judith's sudden loud exclamation startles the Duchess during their meeting. Judith bows deeply, expressing her intense gratitude to her new benefactor. The red-haired woman is filled with immense joy and profound relief. The Duchess watches Judith's sincere display of happiness with quiet observation. The Duchess hides her kindness while Judith continues to express gratitude. Judith celebrates as the lender confirms all her debts are repaid. She adamantly refuses the lender's suggestion of ever borrowing money again. The lender is impressed she didn't flee and offers to invest. Judith ignores the lender's remarks about children resembling their gambling parents. She reflects on her own life or death gamble while walking away. Judith breathes a sigh of relief outside the grand building. She cries tears of joy over her newfound freedom from debt. Judith credits the Duchess's generosity for her sudden financial liberation. Determined to help the Duke's household, she thinks of young Carl. Judith heads to the Information Guild to meet the Master. Sunlight glints off the brick walls and windows of the building. The Master asks about her mourning. She mentions completing marriage registration. The Chibi Master is visibly rattled by the mention of registration. Judith matter-of-factly clarifies that she means the marriage registration. She whispers her plan to announce a pregnancy to the Master. The Master panics, unable to comprehend the logic of her claim. Judith notes his extreme shock despite having given him prior hints. Judith's playful wink leaves the Master even more confused and speechless. The Chibi Master flatly denies having a secret crush on her. Judith questions his shock. He says Aegean Medius is a shocking partner. He calls the pregnancy a lie. She asks how he'd know. The Chibi Master starts to explain but stops himself in panic. He notes she only just became an adult. She agrees. Judith laughs, promising to keep his valid point in mind. The Chibi Master desperately tries to get her to admit it's fake. Judith brushes it off, asking if he called her here to thank her. The Master bows, thanking her for saving him and his people. Judith expects him to handle the fallout of her recent actions. Judith drinks tea as the Master offers to repay her debts. The Master smiles, telling her not to feel burdened by his offer. He insists her life's value exceeds any payment he could give. Judith casually reveals she has already paid off all her debts. She explains the Duke's household provided the funds for her repayment. The Master correctly deduces her fake pregnancy plan is for compensation. Judith accepts the social risk of being a divorcee to delay tragedy. She playfully regrets not knowing the Master was so wealthy sooner. Judith asks him to keep her secret and offers more help. Judith wastes no time and asks the Master for a favor. She seeks Melia's family. He claims total ignorance. He suggests she investigate herself. She refuses to act as an outsider. The master offers to pay her contract penalty. She refuses. He probes for her true motive for entering the Misha's household. Judith admits she cannot ignore what she knows about the future. Narrative text warns that young Carl is in grave danger. Judith's mission is to protect Carl, the novel's tragic future villain. Carl's suffering began after his brother vanished and his parents died. Sarah is revealed as the maid who faked a daughter-in-law role. Sarah's abuse of Carl was hidden from the Duke and Duchess. Judith realizes she lacks any allies within the sprawling Manhuas estate. She worries that any move she makes will reach Sarah first. Judith notes her failed attempt to track the maid Sarah's movements. The masked man questions the truth behind Judith's sudden information. The Guildmaster demands the full story from the red-haired woman. Judith agrees to share her secrets only if he provides hope. The master insists he knows the Mekias family better than expected. The Chibi master coughs nervously as Judith stares at him suspiciously. Judith playfully accuses the masked man of lying about his knowledge. The red-haired woman mentions her pregnancy confession while he defends himself. The master explains the professional limits of sharing information with clients. Judith teases the Chibi master about his lack of professional gratitude. Judith stands firm on her claim of having no outside informant. The master admits his surprise has caused a rare loss of composure. Judith requests useful intel while calmly sipping from her teacup. The pair sits together in the study, planning their next move. A hand sets the teacup down as the conversation turns seriousness. The master reveals his knowledge of a secret passage into the estate. Judith is shocked to learn he has the estate's secret layout. The master confirms the tunnels lead to various rooms, including Carl's. Judith realizes the passage is key to finding clues about Sarah. The master refuses to give Judith a copy of the map. He explains the high risk of getting lost within the estate. Judith is pleased when the master offers to accompany her personally. The master asks for details on Judith's planned stakeout. The masked man emphasizes the urgency of rescuing the boy. They leave the study together to begin their covert investigation. Judith wonders if the guildmaster has a soft spot for children. They emerge from a hidden trapdoor into a dusty old cabin. Judith marvels at the unlikely entrance to the secret passage. The pair descends a dark staircase into the depths of the estate. Judith smiles while walking through the dimly lit underground tunnel. The red-haired woman questions the security of the hidden path. The master explains that the previous source of information is dead. Chibi Judith gasps at the grim fate of the master's contact. They reach a stone wall where the main passage truly begins. The master tells Judith to stay close in the dark hall. The dark-haired man takes Judith's hand to lead her forward. He warns her that straying from him will lead to getting lost. Judith agrees to follow his lead through the oppressive darkness. The master points out the social consequences of Judith's faked history. Judith's gaze softens as she reflects on her future marriage prospects. Judith remembers her lonely childhood and her parents' lack of honor. She recalls her parents' failing marriage and their mutual lack of care. The young girl witnessed her mother leaving with a family servant. Judith noted that her mother seemed happier after abandoning her title. Judith explained she would happily marry a hardworking commoner instead. The guildmaster expresses surprise at Judith's indifference toward noble marriage. Judith smiles while wishing to distance herself from her father's name. The red-haired woman mentions another condition for her future husband. The master finds Judith's bluntness and consistency both amusing and unusual. They finally arrive at the hidden exit inside young Carl's warthog. The master tells Judith to remain silent as they enter. Judith notes the wardrobe is cramped due to the hanging clothes. The master points out the gap in the doors for observation. Judith peers through the thin gap in the wardrobe doors. Judith finds the view perfect but feels a sudden realization. Judith blushes, noticing the master's impressive physique while standing close. Judith recalls her past life consumed by debt and hard work. She reflects on how magic devices once obscured his true voice. The master's hidden traits prevented her from seeing him romantically. Judith admits she never imagined feeling attraction toward her employer. Her heart races from the intense physical proximity with him. Judith is overwhelmed by the master's large and firm build. She wonders if his breathing is real or just her imagination. The master asks if she can see. She suggests he rest. The master is confused why Judith wants him to weave. Judith insists he rest outside while he watches over Carl. They argue about space. Judith claims her smaller build allows movement. The master tells Judith to stop squirming in the small space. Judith notes that the master is too large to move comfortably. The master warns that their closeness makes any movement problematic. Judith flushes and asks him to move away slightly. The master calls Judith unsuitable to work with, surprising her. He admits to losing his composure and feeling quite childish. They agree to focus on their mission to watch Carl. Judith's green eye stares intently through the wardrobe door's gap. They see young Carl playing quietly with his books and bear. Judith wonders how such an adorable child becomes a villain. Sarah the maid knocks and asks for permission to enter. Judith's gaze sharpens as she finally spots the antagonist, Sarah. Sarah enters. The text identifies her as Carl's future corruption. Sarah once believed she was superior to the other maids. She aspired to a high position by staying near Ekian. Though Ekian gave her gifts, he lacked any romantic interest. Sarah knew that showing too much attachment would get her fired. Carl's birth brought joy to Ekian, who loved his brother. Sarah watched Ebian hold baby Carl with a calculative gaze. She used Carl as a tool to gain Ekian's attention. The three spent time together exactly as the maid planned. Everything changed for the worse when Ekian suddenly disappeared. Sarah's dreams of nobility shattered with Ekian's mysterious disappearance. Only one desperate path remained for the resentful maid Sarah. Sarah stands over a crying Carl, her intentions turning dark. She decided to ruin the Mirius duchy using young Carl. The master praises Sarah's character, unaware of her true nature. Judith realizes the master is completely ignorant of the family secrets. Judith reflects on the terrible method Sarah uses against Carl. Sarah tells Carl his mother would be upset to see him. She scolds Carl for reading comfortably after his brother's disappearance. Sarah gaslights Carl, claiming he's happy to be the heir. Carl cries out in denial as Sarah continues her abuse. Young Carl denies having bad intentions while Sarah mentions the Duchess. Sarah suggests the young Duke won't return if Carl thrives alone. Carl tearfully explains he's reading to earn his brother's future praise. Narrative text emphasizes the shifted situation following the young Duke's disappearance. Sarah manipulates Carl, asking if he is eating too well recently. Carl admits he eats only because his mother is watching him. Sarah claims Carl's growth will hurt his brother's feelings of necessity. The maid offers to help Carl vomit in the rear garden. Sarah's dark silhouette looms as she encourages Carl's dangerous emaciation plan. Carl hugs Sarah, fully trusting her malicious advice as helpful guidance. The young boy confirms his absolute blind faith in Sarah's lies. Judith watches in silent fury as the master tries to restrain her. The guildmaster expresses his disgust at the maid's cruel behavior. Judith warns the master that intervening now would be socially disastrous. The master insists on confronting Sarah immediately despite the high risks. Sarah suddenly stops, hearing an unexpected noise from the nearby wardrobe. The maid asks Carl if he invited a guest into his room. Judith's green eyes widen in fear as they risk being discovered. Sarah turns her full attention toward the wardrobe where they hide. A loud thud resonates from within the wardrobe, alarming the maid. Sarah slowly approaches the wardrobe doors to investigate the suspicious sound. The maid begins rummaging through the clothes inside the dark wardrobe. Carl questions Sarah's behavior while she continues her thorough, silent search. Sarah dismisses the noise as a water leak to the head maid. The master holds Judith close, his red eye reflecting intense focus. They remain in a tight embrace to ensure they stay hidden. Judith feels immense relief that their cover was not actually blown. The chibi Judith blushes intensely while being held by the master. The master apologizes for his temper, acknowledging the maid's perfect acting. Judith realizes the master asks Judith what her next move for Carl will be. He deduces Judith has a clever plan to save the young boy. Judith looks up at the master in surprise at his sharp observation. Judith playfully teases the master about his hidden soft spot for children. The master tells Judith to stop laughing while they are so close. He notes her breath on his neck. She teases him about hygiene. A moment of serious realization passes between the two in the darkness. The master bluntly states she isn't pregnant and lacks experience with men. Judith is rendered speechless by the master's sudden and accurate observation. Back in safety, the pair discusses their progress and future objectives. Judith questions who is truly capable of saving Carl from Sarah. A narrative thought bubble reflects on the vulnerability of children in danger. Judith determines that only Carl's parents have the power to save him. The following morning, a formal letter arrives at the guild house. Duchess Isabella Mayus invites Judith to a lunch meeting at the estate. Judith prepares to write a reply while the master waits nearby. Judith is amazed that the master correctly guessed the letter's contents. The red-haired woman expresses her shock at his uncanny deductive skills. The master explains his reasoning based on the Duke's scheduled return. Judith sits to write while the master offers to leave her alone. The red-haired woman suggests the master should leave for lunch since he has been in her room all morning. The master admits curiosity about Judith's plan, but she assures him and tells him to wait elsewhere. The master reveals he has a younger brother Carl's age, making the situation feel personal, surprising Judith. The master questions Judith's shocked expression following his personal revelation. Judith admits she viewed the master as cold and isolated, while he jokingly takes offense to her blunt assessment. Judith asks about garden secret passages, and the master explains his ability to remain undetected without one. The master considers a lethal approach to the problem, contemplating assassinating the corrupt maid. He insists on acting alone to spare Judith the burden of the violent act. The master tells Judith not to judge his harsh methods while setting down his tea. "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Judith slams her desk, yelling that killing the maid won't actually solve the underlying problem. Judith believes the true solution is for Carl to realize the maid's guidance was malicious. Judith explains that killing the maid before Carl learns the truth would not undo her manipulation. The master remains silent, seemingly considering the weight of Judith's argument. Judith warns that Carl would mourn the maid and continue following her harmful advice forever. She notes that a person's influence often intensifies after their death, especially for a grieving child. The master concedes to Judith's logic, apologizing for his earlier loss of composure. Judith smiles, validating the master's anger toward the maid's cruelty. Judith reflects on how the master's display of emotion has finally bridged the long-standing distance between them. She recalls their intimate proximity in the wardrobe, feeling their relationship has shifted. The master suddenly pledges to follow Judith's lead, which catches her off guard. Judith looks surprised when the master asks what her reaction means. He explains his decision to trust her and support her methods instead of acting independently. Judith teases him, asking if he would have otherwise intervened to stop her. The master stares at Judith with a serious, unreadable expression behind his mask. Judith notes the lateness of this new trust, but the master remains firm in his stance. Judith's hand rests on a letter as she prepares for the afternoon's confrontation. The red-haired woman confidently declares that the entire situation will be resolved by the afternoon. A response letter politely declines a lunch invitation while confirming attendance for afternoon tea at the estate. A succulent piece of meat is sliced during lunch at the grand estate. The Duchess observes the visible toll suffering is taken on her guest's appearance. Isabella reflects on the poor habits and loneliness that contribute to such a gaunt state. Isabella notes that Judith's intelligence and character make her a perfect potential daughter-in-law. Isabella's thoughts of a future marriage are tempered by the uncertainty of her elder son's return. Isabella hides her worries from Carl, who insists he is eating well despite her concerns. The young boy eats enthusiastically to reassure his mother, who encourages his growth. Isabella questions Carl about why he has recently dismissed all his tutors and stopped training. Carl provides a simple, evasive answer, claiming he merely wants to take a break. Isabella accepts his explanation with a gentle smile, allowing him the requested rest. Isabella reflects on Carl's grief and mistakenly credits the maid with providing the boy comfort. Isabella prepares to greet her visitor while instructing Carl to finish his meal alone. Carl agrees to wait for a future introduction to the mysterious guest his mother mentioned. Beautiful red roses bloom brightly under the clear afternoon sun. Isabella chooses the fragrant rose garden as the ideal location for her upcoming tea time meeting. A sudden encounter in the garden causes Isabella to look back in shock and confusion. Judith urgently shouts for help, claiming the young master is in immediate and grave danger. Young Carl wanders through a lush garden path, distracted by a passing butterfly. Carl joyfully calls out to the maid as she approaches him in the garden. Carl explains to Sarah that his lunch with his mother was interrupted before completion. Sarah realizes the garden gathering provides her the perfect opportunity to act without being watched. Carl confirms to Sarah that he has followed her instructions to stop his studies. The maid thanks the young boy for following her advice so perfectly. Sarah smugly reflects on how easily she can manipulate the young genius. The maid's internal monologue reveals her true name and her pride in her control. Sarah harbors delusional thoughts about her worthiness to marry into the noble family. The maid blames the elder son for abandoning her and ruining her plans. Sarah believes her talents are wasted in service and resents her humble upbringing. A twisted smile crosses the maid's face as she shifts blame for her malice. Sarah presents Carl with a potion designed to force him to vomit. "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Carl wonders if making himself sick is truly the path to his brother's return. Sarah doubles down on her lies, claiming the elder brother will return out of worry. She warns that the boy's success as heir will only keep his brother away. Carl tearfully accepts the maid's logic, fearing he will never see his brother again. The boy internalizes the harmful idea that he must fail to be loved. Sarah continues to paint a false picture of a happy future if he complies. Hidden nearby, the master watches with lethal intent, waiting for Judith's signal. The master's fury boils as he listens to the maid's vile manipulation. Eerie shadows loom in the garden as the confrontation reaches a breaking point. Sarah urgently pressures the young boy. "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." The maid plans to make the harmful medicine a permanent part of his routine. Carl prepares to drink the liquid, unaware of the impending interruption. A hand suddenly strikes the potion away, preventing the boy from drinking it. Duchess Isabella intervenes with a horrified expression as the bottle falls to the ground. Sarah is paralyzed with shock as she realizes the Duchess has witnessed her. Isabella's rage explodes as she commands the corrupt maid to stay silent. The Duchess's voice thunders with authority, demanding the maid's immediate silence. Sarah collapses to the ground in terror before her mistress's overwhelming fury. Isabella denounces the maid as an ungrateful wretch for harming her son. The Duchess orders the head maid to have Sarah imprisoned in the dungeon. Judith arrives with the household staff to carry out the Duchess's harsh command. Sarah screams in protest as the other maids seize her and drag her away. Isabella's internal thoughts reveal her deep disgust for the maid's cruel actions. Judith watches the capture while the other maids threaten Sarah with the night's discipline. The red-haired woman shifts her focus to the emotional aftermath for the young boy. Carl defends the maid, mistakenly believing she was trying to help him find his brother. Isabella confronts Carl about his dangerous behavior and his refusal to see the truth. The Duchess asks the boy if his brother would really want to see him suffer. Carl is shaken by the unprecedented depth of his mother's visible anger. The young boy breaks down, overwhelmed by his desperate desire for his brother's return. Judith gently intervenes, asking the Duchess to stop her harsh questioning of the child. The red-haired woman suggests that the blame lies entirely with the maid's manipulation. Judith reminds the Duchess that despite his genius, Carl is still emotionally a child. Narrative text emphasizes the boy's extreme youth and vulnerability despite his intellect. Isabella's expression softens as she begins to understand Judith's perspective on her son. Judith offers a kind smile, validating the boy's natural immaturity and confusion. The red-haired woman comforts Carl, explaining that being smart doesn't make him an adult. A simple message highlights the fact that the boy has only lived 8 years. Close-up of the young boy's eyes, finally showing a glimmer of clarity through tears. Judith formally introduces herself to Carl, starting a new chapter of trust. Young Carl formally introduces himself to Judith, bowing politely to his new guest. Judith counters the maid's lies, suggesting the boy's brother would want him to succeed. Judith reminds Carl that his brother entrusted him with the care of their parents. The young boy clenches his fist, struggling to process the red-haired woman's challenging words. Carl defends the maid's long-standing connection to his brother while Judith listens intently. Isabella interrupts with a shout, questioning the maid's importance if the brother left silently. Carl tearfully asks why he should trust Judith over the maid he already knows. Isabella shocks the garden by claiming Judith is pregnant with the elder brother's child. Stunned reactions ripple through the group as they process the Duchess's sudden, massive lie. Isabella doubles down on the false claim to secure Judith's authority over the boy. Carl panics about the supposed pregnancy, urging Judith to stand up for her health. Judith is baffled by the boy's sudden concern and his oddly specific book knowledge. Carl asks the red-haired woman if she knows his brother's current whereabouts. The conversation highlights the sadness of the elder brother's repeated and mysterious disappearances. Carl sighs in pity, assuming Judith is heartbroken by his brother's abandonment. Judith and Isabella share a smile while Carl views the situation with comical disbelief. The boy stares at Judith's waist, confused by the metaphorical smoke of the deception. Carl's grief turns to fury as he labels his own brother a total deadbeat. Carl apologizes for his brother's indecency while the master listens guiltily from the bushes. Hidden nearby, the master contemplates if it is the right time to reveal himself. Carl reevaluates Judith over tea, concluding she is a genuinely good person. Judith is impressed by the boy's intelligence as they bond over advanced literature. Carl asks when Judith will move in following her public marriage to his brother. The young boy realizes that the maid's interference was the only reason for Judith's delay. Carl asks to call Judith his sister-in-law, receiving a very warm and happy response. The boy requests that they drop formal titles since they are now family. Judith agrees to the boy's request, solidifying a new bond of trust between them. Carl promises to scold his brother upon his return, making Judith laugh. A close-up shows the boy gripping his teacup with a sense of renewed determination. Carl tells Judith not to worry even if his brother never comes back home. The boy's small hand rests against the cup as he offers his sincere comfort. Carl eventually falls asleep, looking like a peaceful child after the day's excitement. Judith hears a suspicious noise coming from the wardrobe and turns to investigate. The red-haired woman realizes the master is still hiding inside her furniture. Judith teases the master about his excessive free time and constant following. The master emerges from the wardrobe, claiming he was ready to rescue her. He asks Judith to explain the details of how she successfully orchestrated the plan. Judith describes how she coordinated the garden meeting to expose the corrupt maid. She explains that the Duchess followed her immediately once she mentioned the boy's danger. Judith reflects on the Duchess's temper, finding the maid's downfall to be quite satisfying. The master stares intensely at Judith, hoping the young boy wasn't too emotionally wounded. Judith teases him for staring so hard, joking that he'll burn a hole in her. The red-haired woman guides Carl through the estate, allowing him to take his time. Judith smiles warmly, reflecting on the beauty of letting children grow up slowly. Beautiful roses and flowers bloom, creating a serene atmosphere in the garden. The master offers a rare, sincere compliment, calling Judith a truly good person. Judith is momentarily stunned by the master's uncharacteristically kind and direct words. Judith playfully asks the master if he has developed a crush on her. The red-haired woman leans in close, teasingly asking if he fell for her today. Judith points out his bad timing, jokingly reminding him she's becoming a married woman. The master stares at Judith, completely paralyzed by her sudden and unexpected proposal. Judith laughs joyfully as she offers to consider the master for marriage. The flustered master is visibly overwhelmed by Judith's sudden and bold proposition. Judith confidently predicts that her future wealth will resolve all her current debts. Judith argues that clinging to a missing presumed dead man is ultimately a pointless endeavor. She expresses a shallow worry that the missing man has lost his handsome looks. The master grows angry at Judith's focus on appearances over genuine emotional bonds. The master advises Judith against rushing into another marriage so soon after a loss. Judith reflects on her lonely family life while considering the master's pensive advice. Judith recalls the unfortunate circumstances of the messy, unloving family she was born into. She admits she envied young Carl because her own parents never truly cared. Judith maintains a hopeful outlook, trusting that her difficult life will eventually improve. Judith offers the master a chance, valuing his financial stability over social status. Judith jokingly admits she might not even like the face beneath his mask. Judith watches over young Carl as he whimpers through a nightmare in his sleep. A warm and genuine smile crosses Judith's face as she watches the boy. The master reflects on the surprising depth and honesty of Judith's recent words. The master is mesmerized by Judith's casual but incredibly refreshing and honest nature. An invitation arrives from Duke Menius, and the master formally sees Judith off. The master justifies his constant presence by citing his role as an information leader. Judith hopes the master will respect her boundaries while she is away on business. The carriage carries Judith toward her high-stakes meeting at the Menius ducal estate. Judith contemplates the possibility of pursuing the master if he turns out to be handsome. She decides to delay any romantic thoughts until after her current mission is complete. Judith arrives at the estate, bracing herself for what she considers the final hurdle. Judith stands ready to finalize her official role as the family's contract bride. Judith is momentarily startled by being addressed as both a baron and family. Young Carl excitedly rushes to welcome Judith as she enters the estate's hall. Isabella hides her relief behind a cold facade while Carl celebrates Judith's arrival. Isabella awkwardly mentions the garden's roses to hide her true, softer emotional state. Judith realizes Isabella's mention of the flowers is a hidden gesture of maternal kindness. Judith finds Isabella's clumsy and roundabout way of expressing affection to be quite endearing. Judith teases Isabella about finally sharing the same fondness for a person as Carl. Judith recognizes an ominous figure from her memories of the story's tragic original timeline. The intimidating Duke Medius sits prominently, awaiting the start of their formal meeting. The Duke formally greets Judith with a gaze that is chillingly sharp and intense. Judith identifies the powerful man before her as Ben Maus, the Iron Duke. Ben Maus introduces himself, exuding an aura of immense and unyielding authority. Judith is intimidated by the Duke's cold and sharp appearance, resembling forged iron. The sheer intensity of the Duke's freezing presence leaves Judith feeling deeply unsettled. Carl politely excuses himself after giving Judith a final, heartwarming welcome to the house. Carl offers Judith a sweet word of encouragement, which she finds incredibly adorable. The Duke introduces the primary physicians tasked with overseeing the household's long-term health. Judith is horrified to discover that the chief physician is the notorious Bart Cologne. Judith recalls that Bart is a traitorous spy working secretly for the Emperor. Narrative text describes the deep-seated rivalry between the Menius family and the Emperor. The Emperor's covert plots to undermine the Duke's immense influence are finally revealed. Bart Kalan internally gloats over his successful deception as a loyal imperial servant. Judith realizes this physician is the primary architect of the family's impending downfall. The Duke explains that Bart manages the entire household's nutrition and personal health. Judith confirms her understanding of the complex medical plan being discussed. Hugh Dramus introduces himself as a talented 21-year-old estate physician. The Duke praises the young doctor's academic brilliance and loyalty. Judith feels relieved that Hyud has no connection to the traitors. The Duke ensures Judith understands the purpose of summoning the physicians. Ancient Maus lore describes a unique energy felt from the womb. Narrative text explains how falsified documents will pretend Echion is alive. Judith calculates that the traitorous physician won't act against them yet. She trusts her knowledge of the novel to predict upcoming events. The Duke asks for the documents to be falsified immediately. With their mission complete, the physicians take their leave quietly. The Duke commands Judith to move into the estate permanently. Judith formally accepts the Duke's authority and her new residency. Isabella maintains a cold front while the Duke attempts to mediate. Isabella critiques Judith's wardrobe, calling her current clothes out of fashion. The Duchess reminds Judith to maintain a sense of high responsibility. Judith's enthusiastic response prompts Isabella to command an immediate departure. Dressed in high-fashion traveling gear, Isabella prepares for their excursion. A dramatic transition visual signals the start of their shopping spree. Judith models an elegant white gown that Isabella immediately orders. Isabella adds a sophisticated black dress to their massive purchase. The Duchess is impressed by how well every style suits Judith. The designer mentions that only one final gown remains to see. Isabella encourages Judith to try on just one last outfit. Judith admits the process isn't hard, but it is becoming overwhelming. The scale of the shopping trip leaves Judith feeling quite worried. Chibi Isabella insists her generosity is simply her own selfish wish. Isabella commands Judith to hurry into the final dress fitting. The designer expresses great pride in Judith's ability to mow. The proprietor curiously asks about the true relationship between the women. Isabella shocks the shopkeeper by naming Judith as her daughter-in-law. A servant prepares to draw the curtain for the final reveal. The reveal leaves Isabella and the designer momentarily stunned and speechless. Judith asks if the ruffled pink dress truly looks good on her. Isabella declares it the best and orders Judith to wear it. Isabella commands the shopkeeper to dispose of Judith's old rags. Judith realizes that Isabella actually likes her despite her sharp words. Judith stands amidst a mountain of boxes from their excessive shopping. Subset paints the sky as they finally return to the estate. Isabella personally leads Judith to her newly assigned living quarters. Judith is shocked to learn she will be staying in Echion's bedroom. Young Carl knocks on the door, asking to visit his sister-in-law. Carl and Hyde enter, both mesmerized by Judith's stunning transformation. Carl compliments her beauty, realizing his brother had excellent taste. Hugh stands completely frozen, unable to look away from Judith's radiance. Judith is impressed by Hugh's polite and socially adept reaction. Judith tells her guests she will join them downstairs very shortly. Alone at last, Judith takes a deep breath to calm herself. She reflects on the gravity of sleeping in the missing Duke's room. The realization of living in Ekian's private space feels incredibly strange. Judith notices the bedroom is perfectly maintained despite being vacant. She realizes the Duke and Duchess are still waiting for his return. They want him to feel at home when he comes back. Judith is startled by a sudden knocking sound from the bookshelf. Startled, Judith asks who is there and wonders if he has returned. The voice identifies itself as the person she knows, telling her to relax. The black-haired man in the mask remarks that she looks dangerous. A snowy night memory begins with a father calling for Ekian. A young Ekian follows his father into a room filled with crates. The father reveals a secret passage connected to the Manhuas mentioned. Young Ekian is amazed that such a secret place exists. The father explains the path is only for the patriarch and heir. He describes the path as a privilege carrying immense responsibility. In a crisis, the head must survive to ensure the family's continuation. Young Ekian finds it difficult to accept the idea of escaping alone. The father says the choice between surviving alone or fighting is his. Young Ekian feels his father shares his desire to protect the family. The father is glad they share the same mindset and smiles. Young Ekian vows to become a family member just like his father. The black-haired man reflects on the truth he eventually learned. He explains he kept sneaking back only because Carl was in Gameshire. The black-haired man knocks, deciding this visit will be his last. He appears before Judith, telling her to relax as she stares. The master asks Judith for help exiting the secret passage mechanism. Judith pulls the books according to his instructions to open the way. Judith is shocked that an outsider can move through the estate freely. The master asks her what is wrong and tells her to focus. The master admits he was surprised by her sudden stunning transformation. Judith realizes the master might be staring because of her new look. Judith playfully asks if he has fallen for her all over again. Judith reminds him to hold back until they are officially divorced. The master contemplates what would happen if he truly returned home. He knows his parents and young Carl would be incredibly happy. He worries that Judith would leave once his identity is revealed. He wonders if she might stay because of her former feelings. The master dismisses the thought as insane while Judith looks on confusedly. He chides himself for coming back and calls the situation dangerous. Judith asks if something is wrong and he says it's nothing. Judith asks the master about the physician Bart Carlin's history. The master details Bart's long medical career and perceived loyalty. He explains why Bart might not have taken an assistant before. Narrative text suggests it could be a mix of both reasons. Judith asks if his promise to repay her is still valid. She tells him the situation in the estate is extremely serious. Judith warns that 3 people in the estate might be poisoned. Judith formally asks the master for his help in this crisis. Isabella praises Judith's growth and kind heart to the Duke. Ben expresses guilt over how they impacted Judith's future prospects. They discuss the possibility of her remarrying into a decent family. Chibi Ben clears his throat while Isabella reflects on Judith's character. Isabella reminds the Duke they will be strangers soon, but he believes clothes and jewels are sufficient repayment. Isabella argues that trivial gifts cannot repay Judith for saving Carl, though Ben feels marriage arrangements go too far. Isabella warns that Judith might use the Medius name, but Ben remains confident she is not that type of person. Ben admits he trusts Isabella more than Judith, while Isabella suspects Ben will eventually shower the girl with gifts. Isabella observes the Duke, wondering exactly how long he can maintain his cold and detached front. Sunlight filters through the lush trees outside the grand estate, signaling a shift to the Duke's private study. In the quiet of his library, the Duke sits at his desk reviewing official family documents. The Duke takes a contemplative sip of tea while focused on the various papers laid out before him. A sudden, sharp knocking sound at the large wooden doors breaks the Duke's concentration. Judith identifies herself from the hallway and requests a brief moment of the Duke's time. The Duke looks toward the door with an intense and expectant gaze at the mention of her name. Ben permits her entry, provided that she's there to discuss an official family matter. A close-up view shows a delicate teacup filled with a warm, amber-colored liquid sitting on its saucer. A maid finishes serving the beverage and prepares to leave the room as instructed. The Duke dismisses the servant, noting he already has his drink and no longer requires assistance. The heavy doors to the study swing shut, leaving Judith alone with the intimidating Duke. Judith asks if he is drinking the tea prescribed by Bart, which Ben confirms is his daily routine. Narrative text reveals that Bart had already visited that morning to check the Duke's health and prescribe tea. An internal monologue reminds Judith that she will be treated like family as long as she stays there. Ben asks for the purpose of her visit, and Judith brings up a concern regarding her marriage registration. The Duke listens intently as Judith explains that she might have recently had a change of heart. Judith reveals to the surprised Duke that her birthday has actually just passed quite recently. "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Judith expresses deep concern that this revelation would destroy the young Duke's honor and the family reputation. Narrative text describes the Duke and Duchess realizing Judith is far more thoughtful than they initially believed. They're impressed that she is prioritizing the honor of Ekian and the duchy over her own gain. Judith suddenly interrupts the conversation, reaching out her hand to get the Duke's attention. Claiming to smell a strange scent, Judith asks the Duke for permission to examine his tea more closely. Judith recalls that according to the novel's original plot, the couple was destined to die within a year. She notes that despite their fate, neither of them currently appears to be ill or weak at all. Judith deduces that Bart Kalan must be currently laying the groundwork to slowly poison the couple. A new question arises in her mind regarding how Carl managed to survive in the original timeline. She remembers the Duchess saying Hugh makes medicine for Carl's stomach aches, which might be the secret to his survival. Judith explains how she previously asked the black-haired man to notify her when the Duke drinks the tea. In a memory, the Master questions her suspicion of Bart, but Judith insists he follow her instructions anyway. Judith realizes that a false accusation would have massive consequences, but she feels compelled to act. The Duke is visibly taken aback and repeats her request to examine his personal drink. After a moment of silent consideration, the Duke tells her to go ahead with her examination. Judith leans in close to the teacup, carefully inhaling the steam to identify the specific ingredients. Confirming the scent is from the tea, Judith urges the Duke not to drink and to call Hayud. The Duke stares at her with sharp confusion, wondering why she is specifically requesting the younger physician. Judith concocts a story about working as a tutor for an apothecary family to explain her medical knowledge. She claims this experience allows her to identify various medicinal herbs simply by their distinct scents. Judith tells the Duke that the tea contains a scent very similar to a dangerous poisonous herb. She explains that this specific plant shows no symptoms initially, but eventually leads to a certain death. Judith stares firmly at the Duke, emphasizing that one must be absolutely sure when it comes to health. Ben realizes Judith is being completely serious and recognizes the weight behind her sudden warning. The Duke immediately summons the butler to the room to carry out a new command. Ben orders the butler to bring Hayud and the tea consumed by Isabella and Carl immediately and secretly. Hugh arrives and stands before 3 cups of tea, ready to perform a critical medical analysis. The brown-haired physician expresses relief that Judith is unharmed despite her claims. Hugh asks for a definitive method to verify the suspicious tea. Hugh notes the difficulty of smuggling poison, while Judith suggests herbal mixtures. Hugh hesitates to review his senior's prescription to avoid showing disrespect. Ben describes the deceptive health improvements they felt from drinking the tea. Judith questions the true state of young Master Carl's health. Judith points out the contradiction of Carl's stomach aches if the tea worked. Judith desperately searches her mind for a way to prove her warning. Judith realizes she overlooked a detail and asks for a brief moment. A chemical test added to the tea causes a dark, smoky reaction. Judith reflects on how the family's original grim destiny is being confirmed. Narrative thoughts detail Bart's long-term plan to slowly eliminate the family members. Judith deduces that Carl survived only because of Hayud's specific stomach medicine. The young physician stares in absolute disbelief as the poison is revealed. Hugh grimly confirms the presence of poison, shocking the Duke and Judith. Hugh identifies the toxic combination as the lethal patient-assassin poison. Narrative text explains the poison's deceptive early vitality followed by certain death. Hayud explains that Carl's sensitive child body reacted to the poison early. Ben asks with visible distress if Carl is currently in immediate danger. Hugh realizes he was inadvertently administering the exact antidote for the poison. A chilling visualization depicts the mansion standing empty following the family's death. Hugh reassures the Duke that their condition can still be treated successfully. Ben asks for the statistical probability of this being a medical mistake. Hugh weighs the physician's expertise against the calculated specificity of the toxins. Hugh determines the act was intentional, leading Ben to request private time. Ben sternly demands absolute secrecy regarding the discovery as they prepare to exit. The Duke addresses Judith by her title as she turns to leave. Judith pauses and looks back at the Duke with a neutral expression. Ben offers a rare, appreciative smile toward Judith for her intervention. Moonlight filters through the trees as the scene shifts to the evening. Isabella asks if the physician confessed, but Ben reveals the evidence sufficed. They discuss the betrayal and suspect a mastermind behind the physician's actions. Isabella expresses profound relief and gratitude for Judith's help in their crisis. Ben acknowledges Judith's loyalty despite her upcoming departure from the Mias family. The Duke and Duchess sit together processing the weight of the betrayal. Ben vows to protect and take responsibility for Judith even after her divorce. Ben plans to secure Judith a marriage into a high-status family. A chibi Duke smugly reflects on his corrected opinion of Judith's character. The masked master asks Judith how she uncovered the physician's complex plot. Judith lies about overhearing suspicious activities regarding poisoning near a guild. The master struggles to understand how such a loyal servant could betray them. The black-haired man expresses deep skepticism regarding the physician's true loyalties. Moster suggests the physician's entire loyal persona was a tool for assassination. He explains the strategic reason for choosing such a slow-acting certain toxin. The master admits that Judith's theory of a perfect assassination is possible. Master urges Judith to sleep, but she insists she is still awake. Judith jokingly accuses the master of making romantic moves on her late night. The flustered master questions her assumption about their late-night meeting in her room. A sudden loud knocking at the door breaks their private conversation. Judith and the master wonder who would visit them at such an hour. From outside the heavy doors, Hugh requests a private moment to speak. Inside the room, Judith is startled while the master questions if she will permit entry. The master expresses intense concern about Judith being left alone with the physician. A chibi master frantically accuses the visitor of having romantic designs on her. Judith dismisses the master's jealousy and tells him to stop his dramatic behavior. Judith physically pushes the reluctant master toward the exit, urging him to leave quickly. The master critiques her attire, but Judith explains the Duchess discarded her usual clothes. He addresses her formally as Baroness, causing Judith to react with visible irritation. Judith demands he stop being pathetic and leave, while the master is offended by the insult. Judith compares his behavior to a suspicious husband, leaving the master completely stunned. The master is speechless as the door is finally slammed shut behind him. Standing alone in the hallway, the master remains dazed by her sharp accusation. Returning to her guests, Judith formally invites Hyud to enter her room. Hyud steps inside the grand study, maintaining a respectful and somewhat nervous posture. Judith kindly requests that he simply use her name until her marriage is official. They settle into the sitting area, though neither feels like drinking any tea. Judith asks if Bart has confessed yet, but Hyud confirms the senior remains silent. Hyud admits that his late-night visit is actually regarding a personal matter. He expresses deep professional shame for failing to notice the family's poisoned beverage. Judith reassures him, noting that his duties were intentionally restricted by his senior physician. She suggests his talents are wasted here, but Hyud cites the high pay as a necessity. Hyud reveals he accepted hush money for his siblings' sake, surprising Judith with the truth. He details how his family sold their only asset to pay for his medical education. Now that he is a doctor, he feels a heavy responsibility to provide for them. Judith expresses her sincere condolences upon learning that Hyud's parents have passed away. A sudden sharp realization strikes Judith as she processes the details of his life. She recalls a novel subplot about a marquis's lost son that matches Hyud's story perfectly. Judith realizes she is sitting across from the future head of a powerful noble house. She considers the immense burden Hyud carries while facing unfair treatment and guilt. Judith suggests that he is not truly trapped and could quit his post whenever he wishes. She even suggests using marriage as a strategic excuse to cut ties and leave. Hyud admits that such a selfish escape had never even crossed his mind before. He concludes he could never actually do it, prompting Judith to ask for his reasoning. Hyud explains that simply looking at young Carl reminds him of his own siblings. He confesses his soft heart would always pull him back to children in need. Hyud laments being a doctor who prioritizes money over professional ethics for his family. Judith offers comfort by sharing that she is also lying about pregnancy for her family's debt. She smiles warmly at him, validating his choices as acts of deep love. Hyud is visibly moved by receiving such kindness and comfort from a noblewoman. Judith proposes they become allies and get along well since their situations are similar. She privately resolves that she must help him reclaim his true noble heritage. Judith promises Hyud that she will personally ensure his real birth parents are found. Outside, the master paces the hallway, fuming with jealousy over Hyud's late-night visit. He is irritated that Judith used Hyud's name so quickly after meeting him. He recalls her earlier words about giving everyone a chance and feels deeply threatened. The master tries to clear his head and focus on the immediate task at hand. The scene shifts to a dark, rainy night at a heavily guarded dungeon. Determined to get answers, the master resolves that he must confront the imprisoned Bart. Narrative text recalls a pivotal night when the master was 17 and the Maes heir. During a violent storm, Bart requests a moment of the young duke's time. The blonde young duke permits the senior physician to enter his private room. Bart enters the room and expresses his gratitude to the young heir. Ben asks the reason for the late visit, hoping there is no bad news. The physician emphasizes his deep and long-standing loyalty to the Matthias family. Bart states that he must speak the truth despite his respect for the Duke. Bart reveals that Ben is not the biological child of the Duke and Duchess. The young heir is shocked and calls the physician's sudden claim insolent. Bart tells him to inspect the morning tea for a reagent that changes hair color. Ben refrains from drinking the tea, desperately hoping the physician's words were false. Dark roots begin to emerge within Ben's previously golden blonde hair. The undeniable physical change forces Ben to accept the truth of Bart's claims. Ben rushes into Bart's study, shouting the physician's name in desperation. The blonde youth frantically demands to know the identity of his real parents. The scene shifts back to the present with a formal acknowledgement. The black-haired master stands before the bars of Bart's dungeon cell. Bart recognizes the master and notes his own battered, bloodied appearance. The physician realizes the master's arrival caused the prison guards to flee. Bart mocks him, addressing him by his true title as an imperial prince. The dying physician urges the master to ask his questions quickly. The master questions why Bart drove him away if he was disloyal. Bart laughs, stating that the master can feel the royal truth himself. The physician claims the master now looks exactly like the young emperor. Bart explains his actions were designed to cause the master maximum torment. The physician declares that driving him out was the most effective psychological torture. Back in the bedroom, Hyud discusses the high cost of medical academy tuition. Judith and Hyud share wine and expensive snacks while they converse together. Hyud explains how his wages help support his younger siblings' education. The brown-haired physician pours more wine, enjoying the generous perks of his job. Achibi Hyudi praises the Duke despite the family's poor public reputation. They discuss the imperial house's long-standing hostility toward the Manius family. Hyud mentions the long period of time when the Duke and Duchess were childless. He reveals the Emperor openly mocked the couple's struggle with infertility. The Emperor reportedly publicized the Duchess's private medical requests to humiliate her. Judith is appalled by the Emperor's cruelty toward the Duchess's desperate wish. Judith resolved to find Hyud's real parents as soon as possible. She wishes she could ask the master for help but feels watched. Achibi Judith decides to ask Hyude for a specific favor instead. Judith asks Hyud for assistance and he agrees to help immediately. She explains her need to send letters without knowing the household servants. Hyud offers to deliver the letters himself during his upcoming supply run. Judith worries about being a burden, but Hyud insists it is no trouble. Judith's radiant and happy smile leaves the young physician completely mesmerized. Achibi Hyude hiccups in shock at Judith's overwhelming beauty. The physician feels the wine's effects and decides to take his leave. Hyud exits the room, promising to deliver the letters the next day. Judith stands up and immediately feels the dizzying effects of the wine. She collapses onto the bed, finding the south mattress to be incredibly comfortable. A secret door behind the bookshelf slides open with a mechanical sound. The master appears and questions how much she drank with another man. The black-haired man crossly notes her intoxication in her husband's room. Lying on the bed, the red-haired woman senses an unusual atmosphere. Looking at the black-haired man, she notes his unfamiliar facial expression. The red-haired woman decides she needs to sit up and talk. She struggles to move as the black-haired master watches her. Sitting up briefly, the red-haired woman feels the alcohol's effects again. She collapses back onto the bed while the master sighs audibly. Amidst a dizzying haze, she determines to stand up very soon. The master observes that she consists of being swallowed by the duvet. Peeking out, she apologizes for her physical weakness after drinking wine. The black-haired master scolds her for drinking heavily with a stranger. She justifies her drinking by labeling the physician as a colleague. He questions their relationship, and she defines their bond as a deal. The master looks frustrated as the red-haired woman protests his reaction. Tightly wrapped, she begs him to move the suffocating white blanket. He warns her not to vomit on another person's bed. The master finds it absurd that he is rescuing a duvet-trapped drunk. As they touch, she wonders if her strange feelings are from alcohol. Narrative text confirms the master's gentle touch is purely well-intentioned. She feels a lingering spark of tension in the quiet room. A chibi version of the woman finds the current situation visually awkward. The master's gloved hand firmly grips the edge of the duvet. He works to untangle the red-haired woman from the twisted white sheets. Judith regrets her decision to speak as she lies there defeated. The master warns her never to trust men who are drinking. She defends her social drinking while he warns about hidden male intentions. She complains about his nagging and asserts her status as an adult. Sitting beside her, he questions the history of her drinking habits. Her head throbs as she demands he stop his repetitive nagging. The black-haired master rubs his temple, appearing exhausted by her behavior. Resting on the bed, she softly calls out to the master. She unexpectedly invites the black-haired man to lie down beside her. He reacts with intense shock, wondering if she has ulterior motives. A flustered master questions why she would make such a request. Judith observes that he has been in a bad mood lately. She suggests that casual conversation is the best remedy for sadness. She insists that they simply talk while resting on the bed. The black-haired master finally lies down on the bed beside her. They both gaze up toward the ornate, glowing golden chandelier above. He tells her to avoid drinking alcohol, specifically with the physician. He explains that men will easily misunderstand her casual invitations. The master questions if her offer is truly just a favor. Judith realizes she is offering a favor using the Duke's property. She casually decides to offer a generic apology to the Duke. The black-haired man breaks into a sincere and genuine laugh. Judith notes that his mood improves significantly when he finally laughs. She smiles warmly, happy to see him engaging in simple conversation. The master admits that he has finally rediscovered how to laugh. He confesses that he was drawn to her side almost unconsciously. Looking at her with affection, he praises her for being wise. Narrative text reveals her comfort came from lived experience, not wisdom. Narrative text recalls Judith's childhood desire for companionship during illness. The red-haired woman gazes out at the rain, longing for support. Judith sits alone, reflecting on Hyud's mention of his many siblings. A close-up of Judith reveals her sudden realization of her loneliness. Narrative text questions if her feelings stem from the master's situation. Judith lies on the bed, attributing her emotional state to alcohol. Flowers bloom under a night sky, symbolizing their long, trivial talk. Judith wakes to find the master gone and herself warmly tucked in. The red-haired woman yawns and stretches after a restorative night's sleep. Judith prepares to ask the master about the House of Soden. She looks over the city, trusting Hayud to deliver her letter. Hyud walks through the bustling town square, humming a cheerful tune. The brown-haired physician holds the final letter Judith entrusted to him. Chibi panels show townspeople praising Judith while offering snacks to Hayud. Hyud smiles warmly, deeply impressed by Judith's kindness and good reputation. The scene transitions toward a new destination under a clear sky. Hyud arrives at the Grey Information Guild, questioning Judith's past employment. Standing at the steps, the physician grows curious about the guild's services. Narrative text asks how to win a specific person's romantic affection. Hyud blushes and smiles, wondering if they sell advice on love. A hand grips a bar as Bart mentions the cursed priest. Bart reveals the Emperor forcibly took a shamaness to conceive him. A visual representation of a loud, echoing, and agonizing mental scream. A gloved fist slams onto the desk in a fit of rage. The master leans over his desk, overwhelmed by a wave of self-disgust. Wearing a white mask, he reflects on his meeting with Judith. He recalls her bold personality and realizes he owes her his life. A vision of Judith's radiant smile fills the masked man's mind. The black-haired master is suddenly startled by a knock at his door. He leans back, sighing as he tries to compose his frustrated thoughts. Hyud peeks inside, announcing he has a delivery for the master. The masked man reacts with visible shock upon hearing the physician's voice. The master smirks, recognizing the man he was jealous of earlier. Hyud serves tea, expressing relief at being granted a direct meeting. They sit together while the master explains his exclusive client policy. The masked master identifies Judith as a very close and special client. Surrounded by flowers, Hyud smiles brightly at the mention of her name. The master observes Hayud's refined bearing and finds his personality quite irritating. The black-haired man's red eyes narrow as he scrutinizes his guest. A chibi master fumes, fearing Judith prefers bright men over gloomy ones. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Hyud politely offers to give him some space. The master stands up, requesting that Hayud wait for his written reply. He reads Judith's request to find Marquis Soden and his wife. The master considers the task simple but wonders about her sudden interest. Hyud leans forward, asking if he can obtain other types of information. The master agrees and asks what the young physician wishes to know. Hyud blushes and admits he is interested in a specific pretty person. He describes her as kind and easy to talk to while blushing. Hyud asks for advice on how to approach her without causing discomfort. The master's pen snaps in half as his jealousy finally boils over. Hyud sits across from the master, appearing confused in the office. The brown-haired physician questions if the guild provides advice on romantic matters. Hayud notes that the building's inconspicuous location and atmosphere make meetings difficult. Despite the master's politeness, Hayud senses an overwhelming and intense pressure. The master's masked face and forgettable voice further shroud his true identity. Hyud feels a wave of embarrassment over the nature of his request. The black-haired master surprisingly offers to predict Hyud's chances with his crush. The master accurately guesses that Hayud first met her at the Mias residence. Hyud is completely taken aback by the master's seemingly impossible knowledge. The master identifies Hayud's specific medical position and mentions his missing former colleague. The physician is deeply impressed by the guild's incredible ability to gather information. The master bluntly advises the brown-haired man to give up on his love. A chibi master explains that Judith only considers the physician a close colleague. Hyud desperately asks what her type is while the master looks annoyed. The master asserts that some things remain certain regardless of individual preferences. The black-haired man suggests that Hyud is already aware of the hard truth. He points out that their current circumstances make a romantic relationship impossible. The master repeats his harsh judgment that Hyud simply is not her type. Hayud argues his objective attractiveness, while the master finds his confidence highly irritating. The master explains that noblewomen typically only marry within their own social class. He claims a woman of her status requires a high-ranking noble husband. The brown-haired physician expresses skepticism regarding such rigid social requirements for marriage. The master reminds Hayud of the noble behavior he witnessed at the academy. The master abruptly ends the session to focus on Judith's pressing request. Hyud inquires about the cost, but the master waives the information fee. The master claims his special relationship with Judith warrants this free service. A transition occurs as the scene changes to a different location. 2 ornate teacups are filled with a special medicinal herbal brew. Hyud explains the long-term detoxification process required for young Carl's recovery. The Duke of Mias expresses his profound gratitude to Hyud for his help. Hyud modestly deflects the praise, attributing the success entirely to the young Duchess. The blonde Duchess praises Judith's sharp intuition regarding the suspicious medical situation. Hyud feels a secret sense of pride before departing from the couple. The Duchess reflects on the necessity of finding a high-status husband for Judith. She determines that Judith's future spouse must be a count or higher. Hyde pauses alone in the corridor, looking deeply troubled by the conversation. The brown-haired physician questions if he is being too greedy with his feelings. He walks through the palace, acknowledging the vast social gap between them. Hyud reminds himself that Judith's kindness is universal and not specifically romantic. He sadly admits that the masked master's earlier assessment was completely correct. The physician briefly fantasizes about the possibilities if he had been born noble. Hyud immediately scolds himself for indulging in such an impossible and foolish daydream. He resolves to find fulfillment within the constraints of his own social standing. Hyud decides to focus on being a supportive friend and providing cures. He finds peace in the idea of them remaining a source of strength. A polite knock on a bedroom door is met with an invitation. Hyud enters the room to find Judith and Carl spending time together. He announces that he has brought a special medicinal tea for the Duchess. Carl expresses concern for Judith's health and eagerly offers his own assistance. Judith laughed warmly and reassures the boy she is not feeling unwell. Chibi Hyude explains that the medicine is specifically intended to help with her nausea. Chibi Carl is shocked by the mention of morning sickness while Judith remains confused. Carl claims to be well informed on the subject after reading a book about pregnancy. Carl asks about the severity of her symptoms, but Judith notes they are mild. Hyude mentions that the remedy is also commonly used for hangovers or general nausea. Judith expresses her genuine relief and thanks the physician for his thoughtful care. Chibihude delivers the requested information since he was already heading into the town. The red-haired woman smiles warmly while holding the letter she received from the physician. Hyud blushes and politely tells her that she does not need to thank him. Hyud resolves to focus on his role as a supportive and good friend. He reflects on their friendship as the scene transitions to a quiet night sky. The grand estate stands silent under the glow of a bright full moon. Judith reads the letter informing her that the Marquis and Marchioness have arrived. She wonders why the guild's written tone has suddenly become so uncharacteristically polite. Judith burns the letter while pondering the best way to reveal Hyud's true identity. The red-haired woman concludes that a direct approach would likely seem far too suspicious. She recalls successfully using a prophetic dream to convince the Duchess in the past. Judith searches for a plausible method by recalling details from the original novel. She suddenly remembers a specific legend that could serve her current purpose. The novel mentions parents who visit a shrine to pray for their missing son. Narrative text describes Chaska, a tribal heir with the mystical power of foresight. Chaska moved to the Empire and built a small, isolated shrine for herself. The mysterious woman eventually vanished without leaving any trace of her whereabouts. Rumors surrounding her disappearance sent the capital into a state of massive uproar. Despite vicious rumors of witchcraft, the shrine became known for its mystical, timeless properties. People eventually flocked to the shrine to offer prayers despite its supposedly ominous history. Judith looks determined as she considers how to manipulate the specific legendary location. She decides she must utilize the shrine to stage her next major move. Judith envisions herself acting as a spirit-possessed medium to achieve her goals. Her first step involves arriving at the shrine before the Marquis and Marchioness. Step 2 requires her to pretend to receive a divine revelation while inside. Finally, she will claim Chaska's voice revealed that the physician is their lost son. Judith feels highly confident that her elaborate plan is absolutely and entirely flawless. She plans to use the health of her baby as a public excuse. Judith realizes she should inform the Duchess of her intentions before it gets late. A sudden knock at the door interrupts Judith's thoughts while she is alone. Recognizing the master's voice through the door, she invites him to enter. Judith is annoyed that he used a secret passage instead of sending a letter. The black-haired master enters the room and confirms he received her previous message. The masked man laughs at her for immediately jumping straight into business matters. Judith flatly agrees that they have no other reason to be meeting each other. The master is visibly taken aback by her cold and professional dismissal. He chuckles, finding her bluntness and strict focus on business quite entertaining. The masked master remains confused by her sudden change in attitude toward him. Judith explains she feels bad for the Duke regarding the use of secret passages. She scolds him, noting that uninvited guests wandering around can be very unsettling. Judith smiles brightly, satisfied that she has established clear boundaries with the man. The master questions her about what she means by using official channels only. Chibi panels show him growing jealous of Hyude's daily proximity and closeness to her. Judith announces she is going to see her mother, leaving the master in shock. Judith confirms she was encouraged to address the Duchess familially. The black-haired man simply acknowledges her reasoning with a short reply. Judith admits the woman's kindness makes their close dynamic feel natural. She quickly grows flustered, realizing how strange her previous comparison sounded. The masked man observes her silently, seemingly deep in his own thoughts. He explains that he only recently discovered the truth of his parentage. He concludes that because of his history, her situation is not. Judith recalls a past moment where he appeared profoundly heartbroken and vulnerable. She struggles to find words of comfort for a man so private. The master questions her destination, catching Judith by surprise mid-departure. Judith reveals her plan to visit the legendary Last Priestess's shrine. The black-haired man grows visibly concerned, questioning her motivations for going. Judith uses her fake pregnancy as a convenient excuse for her visit. He notes that the shrine rarely offers answers to its many visitors. The master asks if the visit is required by her ducal duties. Judith remains silent for a moment, her expression becoming sharp and defensive. She firmly asserts that her personal actions are none of his business. A heavy, awkward silence fills the room as their tension peaks. The master apologizes for overstepping, but notes her deep involvement with others. He bluntly questions the authenticity of her role within the ducal family. Offended, Judith reminds him that she is merely a hired employee. Judith reaches for the door handle, eager to end their unpleasant interaction. She coldly points out that she only answers to her true employer. Standing alone in the hallway, Judith wonders if she overreacted emotionally. She blames the master for making the entire conversation feel so strange. Judith grumbles about him, emphasizing that her position is essentially a fraud. She sadly accepts that her time at the estate is only temporary. Rain begins to fall heavily outside the Grand Palace's ornate windows. A narrative note recalls the physician asking for romantic advice previously. The master recalls crushing the doctor's hopes and feeling a cruel relief. Anxiety takes hold as he realizes the doctor can stay near her. He compares his own shadowy life to the doctor's sincere, open nature. Removing his mask, the master looks conflicted about his own false identity. He admits his mask is the only way he can fake her. He regrets his harshness and worries he drove her away earlier. The black-haired man resolves to find her and apologize for his behavior. He informs his staff that he is heading out to spike a storm. The master promises a quick return as he prepares for the rain. He steps into the downpour, feeling that fate is finally moving forward. The isolated shrine glows ominously with purple candlelight under the heavy rain. He observes the desperate crowd waiting for answers that may never come. The Marquis and Marchioness wait patiently, still hoping for their lost son. He spots Judith nearby and wonders what she is planning to do. Judith wears a dark veil and simple clothes to remain completely inconspicuous. He assumes the Duchess gave her instructions to avoid any public attention. The master cringes, feeling like a total creep for spying on her. He tells himself he is just waiting for the right moment to talk. Judith approaches the entrance of the shrine as the crowd watches on. A blinding flash of lightning strikes the shrine as Judith steps inside. The Marquis couple is startled by the sudden violent display of nature. The masked man wonders if a curse extinguished the shrine's candles. He sprints toward the building as two onlookers watch in shock. He desperately yells toward the glowing shrine, asking why he failed. The man falls to his knees in the heavy cold rain. He tells the priestess to stop her nonsense despite her hatred. A mystical image of the priestess appears as he calls for his mother. Looking desperate, the masked man screams Judith's name through the downpour. A vintage portrait captures a young boy named Cheon Mew's happiness. Narrative text explains he was the wealthy heir of House Mewers. He lived a perfect life with his parents and younger brother. Cheon believed a trusted crown prince would resolve the family's political tensions. As the blonde young man became heir, everything began to change. Bart, the physician, claimed Cheon was not his father's biological son. Bart explained that black hair strands would soon replace his golden locks. Cheon is horrified to find dark strands held within his hand. The young man receives medical documents from the physician for review. Records reveal a suspicious discrepancy between Isabella's pregnancy and Cheon's birth. Narrative text recounts the ducal couple's trip to Barte Island years ago. While on the beach, the couple discovered a baby abandoned in a basket. Cheon is stunned to learn he was found during their secret trip. Bart notes that the baby grew with supernatural speed during that year. Cheon rejects the claims, but Bart reveals he possesses imperial blood. The blonde young man stands frozen in disbelief at the startling revelation. Bart explains that royal blood holds a unique trait under moonlight. Cheon draws a dagger as the moon shines through the window. He prepares to test the truth of the physician's unbelievable claim. A splash of blood stains the young man's white dress shirt. Violent slashes of red depict the painful testing of his lineage. The bloody dagger falls to the floor as the proof is revealed. The moonlight heals his wound instantly, confirming his secret imperial status. Bart claims he is the only person who knows Cheon's identity. The physician warns him never to stain House Mews with imperial blood. Agonized, Cheon left his home to prevent tainting the ducal crest. Years later, Cheon visited Bart in jail to demand the truth. Bart addresses him as a cursed highness and asks about his mother. The imprisoned man asks if he wants to know his birth mother. A dark, sinister silhouette grins from behind the iron cell bars. Narrative text reveals the dark circumstances of the young man's birth. The emperor forced himself upon the legendary last shrine maiden. The maiden birthed him and cursed the emperor to die by his hand. The emperor failed to kill the child due to a secondary curse. Divine intervention or fear of the maiden's words stayed the emperor's hand. An attendant threw the baby into the sea, where House Mouse found him. Bart claims the Duke and Duchess hid the truth out of love. Cheon realizes the emperor expected him to destroy his adoptive family. Cheon asks why he was expelled if he was meant to inherit. Bart admits he originally intended to poison House Mews for the emperor. The physician notes that Cheon's arrival ruined all of his original plans. The emperor wanted to see the ducal family destroyed by their son. Bart assumed the couple would eventually reject Cheon for their biological son. Cheon grew into a young man within the family that never cast him out. Bart repeatedly told the emperor that Cheon would never kill the duke. The emperor eventually stopped responding to messages, leaving his pawn in total silence. Realizing he was merely a discarded pawn, the young man feels deep despair. The conversation shifts to the present, questioning the true reason for his exile. Cheon confronts the imprisoned physician, assuming he finally earned the emperor's favor. He notes that with his departure, the Emperor's tool for destruction was lost. The dark tale concludes with a cynical question about its amusing nature. Under her lace umbrella, Judith notes that her plan is proceeding smoothly. She successfully positions herself near the marquee couple as the rain thins the crowd. Judith intends to claim she received a revelation that the public will believe. She momentarily worries about divine retribution for using the Shrine Maiden's name lightly. Steeling her resolve, Judith reminds herself that her noble intentions justify the risk. Recalling her survival through massive debt, she bravely enters the rain-shrouded shrine. Judith marvels at the shrine's pristine interior and the legendary eternal purple candles. An abrupt supernatural presence startles Judith as she explores the silent glowing room. Panic sets in as she realizes the legendary eternal candle has been extinguished. Fearing a curse, Judith prostrates herself and begs the Shrine Maiden for forgiveness. She pleads for the maiden to overlook her actions while the wind howls. Judith is shocked into silence when an ethereal voice clearly speaks her name. The legendary priestess manifests in a glow, asking if Judith recognizes her identity.